Hello, everyone. Welcome to this much awaited session of Meet the Artist. And we have with us Padam Shri Shubha Mudgal. So, without taking much time, let me introduce you to our moderator, Dr. Ashu Khosla. Dr. Khosla is in charge of learning and development at Shillong University. She has management degree from Indian School of Business and she also has an undergraduate degree in medicine. Ma'am Khosla has authored a book on creativity called Off the Corporate Bus and Into the Creativity Bowl. She also teaches a course on creativity at Shillong University. Now, I request Ma'am Khosla to take over the e-platform for today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sakshi, and welcome everyone who has joined us this morning. Happy Valentine's Day. We are talking about our love for literature and art today. And it's my proud privilege to introduce you to our guest today. So let me tell you, my first introduction to Shubhaji, her music, her craft, her talent, was approximately 2 decades ago. There she was in a beautiful red sari with a beautiful long bindi on her forehead on my TV screen singing a song where the music definitely sounded very pop, very contemporary, but the voice was powerful, trained, and controlled like a true ustad's. This was a song about rains called Ab Ke Sawan Aise Barse, and it was the part of a very path-breaking album. This was also the era of music videos, and this one really stood out. But what I clearly remember is being in awe of this confident, talented woman, so comfortable in who she was, her identity, while she was exploring a territory which was not really her regular genre of music. 20 or so years later, when I held her book in my hands, and I think I was very excited, so I read it in one go. Here again, she was exploring a new territory, and she remained true to herself yet again. Confident of her identity, with no pretenses, no affectations, just simple, heartwarming tales with a common thread, music, which is, of course, her home ground. With her debut collection of short stories, the very accomplished and much decorated singer Padma Shri Shubha Mudgal has turned author. And it is our honor and a proud privilege to have her here today as a guest on the first edition of Shulini Literature Festival. So welcome, Shubhaji. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Khosla, and thank you to all the viewers. I'm really grateful to you for having included somebody who's written her first book now, just a debut author, and for having included me in the festival, and for that very generous introduction as well. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about your book today, Shubhaji, and we're also going to have some conversation about some other things, including your music, of course. We can't neglect that. But the book, let's start with that. The book is it's a delightful a collection of very funny stories, if I may so. But in your own words, you have said that these are stories in which humor camouflages the inevitable sadness that often casts a shadow over the lives of artists. So,
Yes.
when you talk about story collections, sometimes they have a common theme, sometimes they don't. In your short story collection, music is, of course, the common theme. There is also something else that, kind of ties everything together, like a beautiful ribbon that ties a gift. And that is the very elusive Miss Sargam. So the book is called Looking for Miss Sargam. So Miss Sargam just fleetingly keeps getting mentioned in some of the stories, and the reader expects this person to come and make an appearance in one of the stories. So by the time I was down with my last story, I was a little disappointed. I said, "Oh, Miss Sargam is not found. So where is Miss Sargam? Why has she disappeared?" That is what we want to know. And of course, we want to know, how did you come up with this concept of having Miss Sargam in your book, as well as the name Miss Sargam itself? It's quite interesting. So how did you come up with that?
Well, the idea of not really having a story about Miss Sargam was to also sort of suggest that artists she's the quintessential artist who deals with the challenges of time, who is ready to adapt. So if you notice that in her appearances in the book, very brief appearances in the book, she is reinventing herself all the time, and that's what artists often do. And it's coincidence that she's Miss Sargam, but actually she could have been a man perhaps. And it's just the idea of having a elusive character who doesn't really appear fleshed out, carved in stone, either performing this kind of music or that kind of music with a definite personality, but really the idea of having an artist who flits through all the stories, reinventing herself as she goes along. So at one point of time, she's a popular singer in the world of popular music, and then she decides to give up everything and become a classical musician. At one point of time, she's somebody who sings in two voices, so the same singer sings in a male voice and in a female voice. The I think she's just somebody who really for me stands out as the quintessential artist, ready to adapt, ready to change, ready to look at their own work again and find new ways of really expressing themselves.
But where is she right now? Why has she disappeared? Why is everybody looking for her and not finding her?
I really don't know. I had to put her in hibernation for a bit. Let her, COVID has been tough on her. So maybe she'll come out once she gets vaccinated. And perhaps you never know, there could be an entire story about Miss Sargam herself. So
So talking about the stories, which one was your favorite one, and which one was the first one that you wrote, and which is your favorite, and why?
the first one that I wrote was actually the one that has been sequenced as the first, is the opening story in Miss Sargam, which is called Aman Bol,
Yeah.
and which is about sort of these, large events where huge corporate funding actually sponsors an event which is all over the city and in featured in every publication, on every television channel. You have a special program about that particular event, and where in terms of music and what the event set out to achieve, little is achieved, because in this case, of course, I mean, there are artists from two different countries, that two countries with a very checkered and very very fragile, fragmented history. So bringing them together and under this banner of peace and aman, and actually there not being in too much peace even in the event itself, and the jealousies and rivalries that are often experienced in such force-fitted events, or sort of ad world events.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all taken part in them and have tried to do our best. Very often you come away feeling a little, why was I here? Why was this all happening? And so that's the story that I first wrote.
Mhm.
And it's difficult to say which is my favorite story, but one that I think I spent a lot of time writing and rewriting that in great detail, and then saying no, it's becoming, the detailing is perhaps making the narrative a little labored, but it's the story about Mrigo, and about, because I see so many young, talented, extraordinarily talented, committed young artists who unfortunately have to finally take the decision, or are forced into taking the decision to abandon music or merely treat it as a leisure activity, as a hobby. Because unfortunately, the life of a musician, the life of an artist doesn't offer you the same security and the same sense of progress and, doing well that perhaps a, a different kind of job would give. So we have in the world of classical music so many wonderful musicians who spent a large part of their lives and their youth, in fact, working in banks, working as, perhaps as teachers in a school or college, working in the municipal corporations of the cities that they lived in, but just because the life of an artist is so fraught with problems and is so does not provide financial security. So Mrigo to me is somebody, I meet so many Mrigos all the time, and it always breaks my heart to think that um, we are going to lose this extraordinary talent because we just don't provide enough support, unfortunately.
Right. And that's an issue that needs to be talked about, and how it can be solved. But that's very true. We lose so many artists to just the fact that there is not enough money in just
Yes.
practicing art for a living. So I want to talk a little bit about the dedication that you have written for your book. So you have dedicated it to your parents, which is a common thing. Lots of people do that. You call them your gurus, which again is true for a lot of us. Our
Yes.
parents are our gurus. But what struck me is that you said that among other things, you learned your storytelling from them.
Yes.
That is very interesting. So I want to know a little bit more about that, as well as any influences in your growing years which has affected your music as well as your writing style.
Well, my parents, Skand and Jaya Gupta, my mother's name was Jaya Gupta and my father was Skand Gupta, very uh, historic kind of name. So both of them were actually, their profession was, they were professors at the University of Allahabad in the English department. But they had both studied music to some extent. Both were absolutely passionate about music and the arts. And it was because of their upbringing that my sister and I have only one sibling, but basically both of us were received ample, abundant exposure to different forms of arts that were available in the Allahabad where we grew up, which is now called Prayagraj.
Yes.
And both of them wrote, of course, and um, were academicians, but my father in particular was an absolutely wonderful raconteur with a very wry sense of humor and a great storyteller. Not only did he tell us stories when we were growing up, but when my sister and I had children, our sons were regaled by their grandfather by many stories that were created specially for them. So my father had this ability to create characters that were, of course, fictional and quite often mythical, and give them little, I mean, they had their own little mythologies, and little portfolios that were built for them.
Oh,
And he would keep on regaling them with these stories, and the boys would be just delighted when they met their grandfather. So, for example, he had thought about this character who was very loving towards children and gave left them surprise gifts if they were good, and ignored them, but didn't punish them if they were bad. So, and his name was Manus, huh?
oh,
Just Manus.
oh,
Manus would come in a plane, in an aeroplane that was shaped like a shoe, and could leave gifts for good children. And so the boys would be, when they went to visit their grandfather, they would be constantly asking him, "Have you heard from Manus? Is he going to come today?" And then my father would say, "No, he hasn't written to me for a long time." And but maybe, I'm feeling a little hot. Maybe you can turn on the ceiling fan. And the boys would go and switch on the fan, and it would rain toffees, sweets. And he would say, "I think Manus has left those sweets for you because you guys were good and did well in school." So he had all these crazy stories which he would cook up and tell them with great delight and with a very wry sense of humor. And my mother, too, um, she didn't have this, perhaps she didn't write so humorously, but she was a collector of stories. So whether it was folk tales from Kumaon, where she was a Kumaoni, she was born in Kumaon. So whether it was folk tales from the area, or whether it was, um, epic love stories that she had read about in various traditions, Greek mythology, etc. So she was really a collector of stories, and in fact, I remember that she wanted to do her PhD on J.R.R. Tolkien, And that many years ago, when Tolkien's work was, of course, celebrated but hadn't been turned into the many avatars that it has found now. But both of them really encouraged us to read, to try and engage with the arts, and enjoy and enrich our lives with the companionship of the arts.
That's so wonderful. That's so heartwarming to hear. And we were talking about children and how storytelling is so important for them. We also have a session on children's stories coming up soon. So I think you answered a part of my next question already, but I'll combine it with another question and say, the characters in your story that we see, be it Rigu that you have already talked about, Asavari Apte, Shweta Bansal, Sikandar, very, very nicely etched out characters. And you partly answered it because I wanted to ask you, are these real people that you met? Is it real people mixed with your imagination? Second part of the question is about the themes. The theme that runs in your story is like this chasm which exists between the world of a musician, a classical musician particularly, and the real world, or the inability of the commercial world to kind of interact or understand the music world, and vice versa. Their thoughts are different, their sensibilities are different, and their needs and requirements are different. So does this also come from your own experience? I'm sure it does. So how much of the stories are autobiographical? How many of the characters are real people that you've met in life, or it's an amalgamation of all those experiences?
You know, uh, there is no Shweta Bansal in real life. There is no Mrigo in real life. But there are many people like Shweta Bansal and Mrigo and many of the other characters. So, yes, it's not autobiographical, but you could say that a lot of it is from what I've witnessed in all these decades of being a student of music first, and I continue to be that, as well as a professional musician. So, you know, I've not only been on stage and faced the audience and therefore gone through all the challenges and problems that any professional artist would face, but also remember that I've been somebody who's been in a backstage waiting for my turn to come,
Mm.
and have watched all the tensions and all the you know I've been I'm a despite my I mean, perhaps the description doesn't fit me properly, but I'm a good fly on the wall, and I observe people carefully,
Mhm.
and I think I've enjoyed, just watching silently what is happening around me, whether it's in the green room or just as I wait to enter the stage, all the whispers and the tensions and the problems that are happening backstage,
Mhm.
or when we are, let's say, um, you know, very often in a large event, we will be invited for a dinner or a reception after the concert is over, where all the artists will meet, and all that happens over there, the chatter, the gossip, the condescensions. And also I notice, so I've tried to be fair. It's not only about the betrayals and the humiliations that every artist has to
Mhm.
finally go through, but
Mhm.
also about how difficult artists can be themselves. So it's not always, I mean, I have to confess that artists too can be very difficult, demanding, eccentric, and basically, they're often a pain in the neck. So, and we forgive them because of the gifted people that they are. But I've also been, I've worked as a consultant for a few very well, very prestigious record labels. I've been through that experience also, meeting with market people and trying to figure out, when you work with a team, you try and find out what is their perspective. I mean, that's why I became a consultant.
Mhm.
And otherwise, I was only an artist who was being invited to record. But by becoming a consultant and overseeing recordings, I got the experience of what it is to be on the production side as well.
Right.
And I noticed so many things, which I just sort of stored in my hard disk for a while, and, and then then just referred to it when I was creating these stories and these characters. But as I said, I've tried to be fair, that and not just give the impression that the artist is, on a pedestal, and all the others are sort of, against them or humiliating them, even if they don't know that they are doing so. So I've tried to do that.
So I think that's such an important part to bring in different perspectives, because I think Gita or somebody else, I think Gita Harinani, yes, was mentioning the danger of a single story. You're taking a single perspective. That is always a dangerous thing when it comes to expression.
Yes,
Different perspectives, and that comes through very nicely. I mean, you can you can relate to the plight of the people on the other side as well, as you can with the empathize with the artist. So you were talking about themes. So there are some universal themes also that come across in your book. And this is what makes it, I think, relatable or readable for an average reader who might not be very closely associated with music, involved with music. So universal themes like, parents dictating career choices, our fascination with foreign things,
yes,
our deep lust for awards,
yes,
awarded, socially recognized, etc. So it's almost like the book is like a mini world that you have created of your own in a larger universe. And because you have taken these universal themes, that makes it more palatable for even an average reader. So how important is creating that context in art, in writing, as well as is it important in music as well?
oh yes. I mean, without being a keen observer of life itself, and without really looking at, I mean, you don't create art in isolation in any case. So when we are creating music, or when we are performing, or when we are writing, it's very much in today's world, and a lot of our work is impacted by what is happening around us. It's difficult for me to sort of say, despite the fact that I mean, for example, all that is happening around us today, how can I say that no, none of this affects me at all? And that, I'm happy with my Malkos and my Yaman and Darbari. The world can do what it likes. And I don't think it's possible for artists to live in a cocoon. They do require isolation in a sense, but it's a kind of fertile isolation that is required. And the fertility comes from that interaction with people all around us, with life around us. How can I sing? And let me not even talk about contemporary reality, but let's say, how can I sing a jhula without having experienced, let's say, at least as a witness, what a jhula in a village looks like, a rope swing, uh, clouds in the background, a gentle puhar, a little drizzle, a shower. I mean, unless those things have been, you have noticed them, observed them, singing that piece really becomes more mechanical, perhaps, or more cerebral, and sort of you're putting together musical combinations and permutations without really connecting with the literature. So I think it's really, for me, it has been wonderful to also have been a student of life, and to continue to be a student of life, and learn from many mistakes and many stumbles and many, awkward moments. But all of that really has helped me study what I've loved best, and that is music.
So one way I think that you continue to learn is because you write a lot of regular columns on music for a lot of leading publications. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. How is that writing different from fiction writing? Of course, I'm sure it's vastly different. But do you enjoy both forms, or do you prefer one of them?
It was quite a challenge for me to write, because I guess I don't need to mention that you would know much better than me that anything that you do requires riyaz. And for writing to, there's a certain amount of riyaz that is required. And when I started writing a column for a publication which I wrote for many, many years, um, it was quite difficult for me to come up the periodicity, the regularity of the column. It was very challenging for me. And earlier I had written a column for in Hindi also for another publication. And I always used to find it very difficult to sit down, discipline myself to write every fortnight, which was what I did for my column, and to write within a certain number of words, make my point within that word limit, and also be able to share what I wanted to articulate really, with clarity. Because very often, when you like a piece of music or if you're moved by a piece of music, you're just moved by it. How do you explain to somebody else um, why you were moved by it? And also, it becomes very difficult to write about music when a lot of the music that I was writing about was not easily available to people. I had the opportunity as a musician touring various parts of India to come across some beautiful music and some wonderful artists, some of
Right.
whom had never been recorded. And I wanted to share the joy of having listened to them in my column. Now, how do I talk about all of that when their music hasn't been recorded and is not available?
Yeah.
So that was a very big challenge. In that sense, I felt that when I was writing fiction, I could describe this fictional piece of music as well, that this is what it sounded like.
Yeah.
Or you didn't have to refer to a piece of music that already existed. So, if the Badass Bandaria band is playing,
Yeah.
I could cook that up,
Yeah.
rather than have to describe something that existed in reality, but which we didn't have a document of because it wasn't so easily accessible.
So, besides columns, you've also used podcasts as a medium to sometimes express your views on things. And the Serendipity Arts podcast, particularly, is my favorite. There are
Thank
so
you.
many beautiful things and music in that. And podcasts also gives you that liberty of using or the freedom of using, actual music along with description. Plus, you don't have to write; you have to speak.
Yes.
It might be easier. So technology is playing a lot of role in which the way the content is being produced, consumed in the current world. It's kind of changing or making a paradigm shift almost by democratizing the whole process of creation as well as consumption. But what the collateral damage of that is that probably people are falling out of the habit of reading, for instance. So
Yes.
books in their regular forms. Do you think with all this audio visual flooding of content with videos, podcasts, do you think that books will become a passe, will never exist in this form that our generation does for the future?
I certainly hope that doesn't happen, because the pleasure of going into a bookstore, browsing in a bookstore, however difficult that may seem right now, but I mean that's unparalleled, and I certainly do hope that the existence of audiobooks or the existence of podcasts and so much content on the net, that it doesn't really kill the world of actual of the pleasure of actually holding a book in your hands and bringing it back home and putting it in your bookshelf and even putting cataloging it in your collection. So
Right.
I think I would hate for that to happen.
Mhm.
At the same time, as somebody who travels a lot, has a large book collection, refers to that book collection, it becomes very it becomes very difficult to carry those books around. So I also, appreciate the fact that technology really makes it much easier for us to, there's portability also. And also, I think in the last few years, I've been struck by the amount of material, reading material available in various archives, which
Mhm.
have become accessible. I mean, there are books that were printed and published in, let's say, 19th century, which are also available and accessible. I can look at those books. These are books which are not available in physical format, in perhaps in maybe available only in one or two libraries, and yet I can access them. I think that's quite an amazing aspect of using technology and putting it to good use. But not for a moment would I want to imagine a world without books, in the same way that I would not want to imagine a world without acoustic instruments. I mean, today we have apps for tanpura and tabla, and despite their great convenience, uh, I cannot imagine a world where I didn't have all my tanpuras around me, where I didn't have the pleasure of performing with live accompaniment. So I think both need to coexist peacefully, and in fact strengthen each other.
Absolutely. So now we've veered towards your music. So let's continue that conversation. And I want to ask you a question. We had Dr. Irshad Kamil, who's a lyricist in Bollywood,
So yes.
yes, yesterday, and we also asked him this question, and I'm going to ask you that as well, because it's an age-old debate when it comes to songs. Is it the music or is it the lyrics which are more important? And of course, he conceded that the music is the soul, and probably the lyrics are the clothes that you dress it in. That kind of a take. Uh, I have this theory that because music is something that takes, particularly when we talk about classical music, it takes time for that mood to be set. So sometimes, like in songs, when you're performing something for a 3 to 5 minute period, the words also become very important because they are because they trigger emotions, they trigger memories that sets the mood for the listener. So, what is your take on this debate, lyrics versus music, particularly when it comes to smaller compositions? I'm not talking about the longer versions that we perform in Hindustani classical, but maybe small songs. How important are words there?
Well, I think the lyrics are very, very important. And at the same time, I would say that sometimes, I mean, let's take the example of a musician like Begum Akhtar. Were the words of Shakil Badayuni when he wrote Dur hai manzil rahe mushkil, alam hai tanhai ka. They were powerful words. But sung by Begum Akhtar, they became perhaps potent in a different way.
Yeah.
They touched the hearts of many more people who may not have found his divan and read it.
Mm.
And or for example, are the words of let's say Surdas or Kabir or Meera, are they not inspiring? I mean, they are very powerful works. But when you hear them in the voice of so many singers who believe that this is what they should share with their audiences, when the strength of conviction, and when they bring their artistry and their conviction to their rendering of this literature, I mean, aren't we all moved even by the musical rendering? So I wouldn't really say that this is more important or this is not as important. I think there are two art forms, and when they combine, there's really some new magic that happens, and I think that becomes very, very powerful then. So even with film music, um, let's take chartbusters from the past.
Mm.
I mean, I'm a great admirer of Gulzar Sahab. I mean, his work. But Kajrare, Kajrare, Kajrare. I mean, okay, Kajrare, Kajrare, Naina. That's a very often that's a popular theme in many, many songs. But now pack it into that song and then add to it all the namak mirch that was brought into the visualizing of that song, and see what happens. So I think they are complementary in a sense.
So even in our Hindustani music tradition, we have these bandishes or things like tumris and horis and kajris, which are written very beautifully. And
Yes.
I have, for a brief time, studied, learnt a little bit of classical music as well. So
Well,
that mesmerizes me when you have Sadarang coming in. into every thing that you sing, you wonder who these people were. So I think there are some very beautiful words also in
Yes,
the Hindustani classical tradition. So I want
yes.
to ask you something that has struck you as very beautiful when it comes to words, something that you have sung or heard. And if you could hum it for us, that would be great.
Yes, I mean, I've always been very conscious of the lyrics, even in the Khayal compositions
Mm.
and Thumri compositions that I've been studying and performing. And I think it's also helped, I must mention, that each of the great people I learned from, many of them were Vagyakars. So they wrote the lyrics of the compositions that they created.
Mhm.
So many of them were very familiar with different kinds of literature. Naina Devi ji was very familiar with Braj Bhasha literature, but also with Urdu literature. My guru Pandit Ramashray Jha ji was considered one of the most important scholars and composers of contemporary Hindustani music. He wrote thousands of compositions, and not all the themes were unique. Very often, he also wrote on themes which are quite popular in the lyrics in the sahitya of classical music. So about different deities, about Krishna and Radha, about Ram and Sita. But nevertheless, he wrote those lyrics himself.
Mhm.
And so I think I was brought up by my gurus, not just also, of course, the family upbringing that my parents gave me of being attentive towards literature and actually trying to learn as much as possible. But my gurus also really trained me to look at Sahitya as an important aspect of what I'm studying. And for example, one of the chaitis that I learned, so these are compositions, these are songs that are sung during the month of Chaitra.
Mhm.
And it says, "Ah, बिनत बिनत कुम्हला गईल रामा जूही के फूलवा बिनत बिनत कुम्हला गईल रामा जूही के फूलवा." So the the juhi, the flower, is so delicate that even as you pluck it, it starts wilting. Now, uh, in one sense, you can take the literal meaning, but also a lot of the text that we sing is multi-layered. So look beyond the surface, and you start finding a greater depth. And it could be, this could easily be interpreted as a commentary on transience. Life is also like this. The moment you start enjoying it, it's actually slipping away from you. And so I think text really is something that fascinates me, and that's why I've spent a lot of time reading poetry, composing by extracting material from um, various poets, various books that I've had the chance to read, and I think really it's quite an fascinating aspect of music.
Absolutely. So I remember watching a documentary on Girija Devi, and a student of her was recalling that she used to ask the students to pay attention to the words they are singing. For
Yes.
example, she said they were talking about Jhir Jhir Barsat Bundani.
Huh. Huh.
He said, you have to understand that Jhir Jhir is like that light drizzle. So you
Yes.
can't be taking loud and very powerful tans.
Yes.
You have very delicate tans. So that focus on words, I think that is also part of training.
Yes. Yes.
You pay
And
attention to how you sing the words.
yes, and also importantly, I think apart from uh, the interpretation of the lyrics, there's also a certain pleasure and a certain aspect. The phonetic aspect is very important as well. So when you say ghan, when you
Mhm.
talk about the clouds, the phonetic quality of that word also really impacts the sound of the music. So when you say dhad 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 dhadat or ghan garjat, uh, and then so I think I've also really enjoyed all of the phonetic quality of the sound of the language that we use for sahitya in compositions.
Absolutely. We are almost coming to the end, and I would request if any questions are there, please type them on the chat and we can take them. Meanwhile, I'll ask Shubhaji another question. Like books like Looking for Miss Sargam. When I read that, and after a few months, I think I watched. I don't know if you watched the web series called Bandish Bandits, which became popular recently. Uh, what the observation was that a book like Miss Sargam makes us feel that classical musicians are also people like us. A series like Bandish Bandits also made us realize that classical music is not this untouchable, beyond you kind of a thing. It's just a form of music which people learn and practice. So do you think that things like this, the efforts like this to clarify that Hindustani classical musical tradition, because people shy away from it, people get scared when they hear classical music, oh, that's not for us. So is it important to have such projects, going for the youth to understand in their own language more about this tradition? Because this tradition is not going to go away anymore. It's too powerful. But what will happen is that people are getting deprived of knowing it just because of these myths that have been created around it, that it's very difficult to understand. So how far do these projects like this, like your book or a web series, go in that direction?
I can't speak for Bandish Bandits because I don't know what they set out to do.
Mhm.
But by writing Miss Sargam, I don't think I can claim that I would make classical music more popular. I
Mhm.
don't think I could claim that. And as far as I know, I mean, people for decades have tried to um, come up with strategies to popularize and promote classical music. Whether it was the pioneers like, let's say, Vishnu Digambar Paluskar and Bhatkhande, who did their best to bring classical music to a larger, to make it accessible to a larger group of people, or whether it is, let's say, programs like Sangeet Sarita
Mhm.
on Vivid Bharati, which all of us have listened to. I
Mhm.
mean, they were wonderful programs, and they tried to use film music to explain classical music. But did classical music become popular because of that? Uh, I'm not sure. I mean, of course, there hasn't been a survey or a proper scientific study, but I don't think it's really made a difference to the listenership of classical music.
Mhm.
Because when you actually go to listen to a concert of Hindustani classical music, however much you may say that Madhuban mein Radhika Nache Re is
Mhm.
based on Hamir, when
Yeah.
you hear a proper Khayal in Hamir,
Yeah.
you're going to say, oh, I mean, either you're going to enjoy it, or you're going to say this is dreadfully boring, or you may say that, you know, it's not bad, but I don't really understand what's happening. I mean, there
Mhm.
could be a variety of reactions,
Mhm.
but it hasn't made Hamir a more popular rag.
Mhm.
So I think I don't grudge the success of Bandish Bandits, but I don't think it's going to give anyone an insight into the complex world of Hindustani music. Um, Everyone is entitled to tell stories about classical music as they wish to, and I'm happy that it's found its audience. But listening to a track from Bandish Bandits is not going to take you into a concert, into a full length concert of, this is my understanding. Neither is Miss Sargam going to do that. So I think uh, it's wonderful that classical music is getting attention. I would perhaps say that a film like Chaitanya Tamhane's The Disciple might give you a better idea of the very complicated world of Hindustani music, in which many people, immerse themselves in this task of learning music, in this wonderful journey of learning music. Not many find success in the same measure as some others do, and yet it remains a wonderful obsession. for so many of us, whether we are performers or whether we are listeners.
There's a question, in fact, which is related to the one that I was going to ask you towards the end. Um, when you write your next book, so future plans is what I wanted to ask in writing. So somebody has asked, Tanzin has asked that when you write your books, will it be about characters which have nothing to do with the musical world?
My world is really quite, I mean, this is the world that I've lived in and loved living in. And despite the many, despite it being not a bed of roses, I still feel that I'm more qualified, if at all, to write about the world of music, not necessarily classical music. I don't see myself writing about the Kisan Andolan, for example, because I haven't been part of it, you know. So much as I have observed and I watch and I listen, but that's not a world that I'm embedded in. This is a world that I've really, it's, I'm immersed in it. And that's why I feel if I do write again, it would be about music.
There's a question from Sakshi, which is very much about music, the importance of teachers in training. So she says music is taught in Gharana tradition, and when we learn in the Gharana tradition, but this isn't possible for common people. So I think this is more for a musical discussion someday, but because we are running out of time, if you want to take 1 minute to answer that, and then we'll have you sing a little for us, Shubhaji, before we let you go.
So, yeah, now it is possible for anyone to try and study music and also gharanedar music. That not only are teachers ready to teach people who do not come from lineages of musicians, but also there are institutions which are dedicated to the teaching of music. So I don't think accessibility is such a big problem now. The will to learn and the will to learn for an extended period is what perhaps might create problems, but otherwise it's very much part of if anybody wants to learn. I'm a first generation musician, so I think it's possible for everyone to learn if they feel motivated enough. And really, since this is a literature festival, may I please sing a few lines written by the great Sahir Ludhianvi,
Absolutely.
and composed by Anish, my husband. So I'd like to share a few lines about which they're in the hope that there will be a better tomorrow. So, आओ के कोई ख्वाब बुने कल के वास्ते, आओ के कोई ख्वाब बुने कल के वास्ते, वरना ये रात आज के संगीन दौर की डस लेगी जानो दिल को कुछ ऐसे के जानो दिल ताउम्र फिर न कोई हंसी ख्वाब बुन सके, आओ कि कोई ख्वाब बुने कल के वास्ते.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Shubhaji.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure to have had this conversation with you. And thank you so much for coming to the show. And hopefully
Absolutely
we
my
will
pleasure.
have you on our campus when we have a physical version of this next year. We would love to have you on campus.
I'd be delighted. Thank you.